Questioner. Then did the technological advancement of Atlantis come because of this call? I am assuming the call was answered to bring them the law of one and the law of love as a distortion of the law of one, but did they also then get technological information that caused them to grow into such a highly technological society? Ra. I am Ra. Not at first. At about the same time as we first appeared in the skies over Egypt, and continuing thereafter, other entities of the Confederation appeared unto Atlanteans who had reached a level of philosophical understanding, shall we misuse this word, which was consonant with communication, to encourage and inspire studies in the mystery of unity. However, requests being made for healing and other understandings, information was passed having to do with crystals and the building of pyramids as well as temples, as you would call them, which were associated with training. Questioner. Was this training the same type of initiatory training that was done with Egyptians? Ra. I am Ra. This training was different in that the social complex was more, shall we say, sophisticated and less contradictory and barbarous in its ways of thinking. Therefore the temples were temples of learning rather than the attempt being made to totally separate and put upon a pedestal the healers. Questioner. Then were there what we would call priests trained in these temples? Ra. I am Ra. You would not call them priests in the sense of celibacy, of obedience, and of poverty. They were priests in the sense of those devoted to learning. The difficulties became apparent as those trained in this learning began to attempt to use crystal powers for those things other than healing, as they were involved not only with learning but became involved with what you would call the governmental structure. Questioner. Was all of their information given to them in the way you're giving our information now, through an instrument such as this instrument? Ra. I am Ra. There were visitations from time to time, but none of importance in the, shall we say, historical passage of events in your space-time continuum. Questioner. Was it necessary for them to have a unified social complex for these visitations to occur? What conditions were necessary for these visitations to occur? Ra. I am Ra. The conditions were to the calling of a group of people whose square overcame the integrated resistance of those unwilling to search or learn. The second requirement, the relative naivete of those members of the Confederation who felt that direct transfer of information would necessarily be as helpful for Atlanteans as it had been for the Confederation entity. Questioner. I see then. What you are saying is that these naive Confederation entities had had the same thing happen to them in the past, so they were doing the same thing for the Atlantean entities. Is this correct? Ra. I am Ra. This is correct. We remind you that we are one of the naive members of that Confederation, and are still attempting to recoup the damage for which we feel responsibility. It is our duty as well as honor to continue with your peoples, therefore, until all traces of the distortions of our teach learnings have been embraced by their opposite distortions, and balance achieved. Questioner. I see. Then I will state the picture I have now of Atlantis, and you can tell me if I am correct. We have a condition where a large enough number of entities of Atlantis had started at least going in the direction of the law of one, and living the law of one, for their call to be heard by the Confederation. This call was heard because, using the law of squares, it overrode the opposition of the Atlantean entities that were not calling. The Confederation then used channels such as we use now for communication, and also made contacts directly, but this turned out to be a mistake, because it was perverted by some of the entities of Atlantis. Is this correct? Ra. I am Ra. This is correct with one exception. There is only one law. That is the law of one. Other so-called laws are distortions of this law, some of them primal and most important for progress to be understood. However, it is well that each so-called law, which we also call way, be understood as a distortion rather than law. There is no multiplicity to the law of one. This will be the final question in length of this working. Please ask it now. Questioner. What was the only question I was going to ask that I can think of was, could you give me the average lifespan of the Atlantean population? Ra. I am Ra. The average lifespan, as we have said, is misleading. The Atlanteans were, in the early part of their cultural experience, used to lifespans from 70 to 140 years, this being, of course, approximate. Due to increasing desire for power, the lifetime decreased rapidly in the later stages of this civilization, and, thus, the healing and rejuvenating information was requested. Do you have any brief queries before we close? Questioner. Is there any way that we can make the instrument more comfortable or anything that we can do for her? Ra. I am Ra. The instrument is well. It is somewhat less easy to maintain clear contact during a time when some or one of the entities in the circle of working is or are not fully conscious. We request that entities in the circle be aware that their energy is helpful for increasing the vitality of this contact. We thank you for being conscientious in the asking. I am Ra. It is a great joy to leave you in the love and the light of the one infinite Creator. Go forth, therefore, rejoicing in the power and the peace of the one Creator. Adonai.